So today we're going to be talking about IEP progress reports. Now, as an advocate, I see a lot of progress reports. I see a lot of progress reports that have some kind of a code, either abbreviations or, um, like NP for not making progress or P for progress. And there's usually not a lot of other information shared. And that can be really frustrating as a parent to figure out how much is my kid learning, and this past 9 or 12 weeks, how much have they changed? What are things that are going on? So if you would love to get more meaningful IEP progress reports, stay tuned because that's what we are talking about today. And I'm going to play this cute intro. And we are here talking about progress reports, myth busting, and truth talking. So if you're new to the show, welcome. Make sure all of you say hi, whether you're watching live or in the replay, because we like to say hi back. And I am Charmaine Thaner. I host this live, The Art of Advocacy Facebook show twice a month on Thursdays. So I am excited that you're here because I think this is a topic, especially at this time of year. You've probably just recently got a new progress report on your child. So in the comments, let us know where you're watching from. And also, did you get a recent IEP progress report and what did you think about it? So let us know in the comments. And welcome. I see, let me bring them up. And Marie, hey. And Liz is here from California. Diana is here. So thank you guys. It's going to be a great show, I think. So let's move on here. So these are some of the things that I hear from parents, and I wondered if they resonated with you too. So have you ever received an IEP progress report for your child and it just felt like it was missing something, if not a lot? And or maybe you do get a few details in your progress report for your child, but it's really still not enough information to know about the level of learning and progress that your child has been making at school. Or maybe you just have that feeling of frustration of being left out of the loop. It's like you're wondering, is my child making any progress at all? So what I would love for you to do is write in the comments which number or numbers do you identify with. Number 1 is, have you ever received an IEP progress report for your child and felt like it was missing something? If that resonates with you, type a 1. Number 2, the progress report has few details and it still can't provide enough information about how much learning your child really is doing. Number 3, do you feel frustrated, out of the loop, wondering if your child is making any progress? So let's look in the comments. Hey. Trisha's here with us from Idaho. Trisha says 1. So Anne-Marie has a question. She says, can you comment that data is required along with a progress monitoring? So I think, and Anne-Marie will talk about that in a little bit about what you can ask for so your progress report is going to be more meaningful. Hey, Allison from California. She said she got a progress report. Sometimes the update doesn't cover everything from the goal, doesn't specify where he is at and being prompted to do the skill. Yeah, and so that's really important too. And for different parents, what you want in the progress report can be different, right? So you need to look at what, I mean, they're supposed to be reporting on the IEP goals. So hopefully you've had input in the goals, and the goals are what you want your kid to be working on. And then the information that you want, you can decide that, and we'll go into that in a bit. Liz says number 3, yeah, feeling out of the loop. She says number 4 shows that present levels were incorrect. And Diana says high schooler in Tennessee with consultant ST, is that speech therapy? They told me all data will be anecdotal. That doesn't fly with me. Yeah, and so that's the thing, right? And that's why we're here, because we're going to talk about how to get that changed. Tricia said years ago, the special ed teacher came to the parent teacher conference and reviewed the progress report with the teacher and I, but it didn't correspond with grades reported. Yeah, and that's a good point, Trish, that we can talk about later in the show, as far as kind of the difference between general ed report cards, IEP progress reports. Shall the twain ever meet? I don't know. I don't think that's the saying. So thank you. Yeah. And keep your comments coming, keep your questions coming, because we like it to be interactive. So one thing is, this show really wouldn't be a good fit for you if you already are getting meaningful progress reports and it's like, hey, I'm good. Or if you're at a point where, like, I have other priorities in life, and learning about IEP progress reports is not the top of my list. So if that's you, like, that's fine. You need to be doing what you need to be doing at this time. And if you're here, you probably want to learn more about progress reports. And we've got 3 different strategies, or like advocacy action steps, that you can take to finally get those really meaningful reports. However, before we go into kind of the learning phase, we're going to be in the unlearning phase, where we need to stop doing some of the things that we may have been doing in the past. And this is because it's like, if we've been using strategies to try and get better progress reports and it hasn't been working, those are things that you would most likely want to stop, right? And so before we add on new strategies or things that you can do, we want to take away the ones that haven't been working. Okay. Does that make sense? And oops. And the other thing, oops, it's like, oops, I'm going forward. I want to go backwards. Oh, geez. Oh, geez, oh, geez, oh, geez. Okay, now I got to figure this out, maybe with the arrows and not my cursor. Okay, this was the next slide. That was just a pattern interrupt to see if you were paying attention. The other thing about the unlearning phase is, because if you're doing something that perpetuates the problem, that's the first action that you want to take. That's what you want to stop first. Okay. All right. Now we're going into myths. There's 2 really widely held myths about IEP progress reports. So we're going to be busting those today. And the first one is, you can only get IEP progress reports when general education report cards go home. So has anybody ever heard that at one of your meetings, when you say, could we get monthly progress reports? And they say progress reports go home when report cards go home. Is that the way it is? Hey, Kim. So, anybody else hear this myth? So, I hear this a lot. So, what you can do, let's go back here and share, is look at what you've been told, what the status quo says, and you've been told, like, this is how the school does it. Like on some IEPs, right before the goals, the pages with the annual goals, there might be like a disclaimer statement at the top that says, progress reports are issued at time of report cards. And that's just like this blanket statement that, gets written on lots of IEPs. So you just figure, I don't know, that's what they said. That's how it must be, right? And unfortunately, we don't always, as family members or even teachers, know the full story. I think probably there's a lot of teachers that believe the only, time, frequency of sending home progress reports is when report cards go home. Um, and some of the issues that I see now, especially because I know, Allison, I think in your district, they have a trimester system, right? So quarterly system, you're waiting 9 weeks to get a report card, to get an IEP progress report. If you're in the trimester, you're waiting 12 weeks before you get a progress report, a report card. And I can't remember what state this was in, but I even remember an IEP that only gave beginning of the year and end of the year report cards. So if that's how frequently you got your IEP progress reports, I mean, that would not help, right? I mean, that would be a pretty ridiculous amount of time to wait. So what we need to do is look at, for me as an advocate, what I like to do is look up what IDEA regulations say. What a concept. So when you check the IDEA regs, as one does, you will find that this is what IDEA says is required to be in a progress report: a description of how the child's progress toward meeting the annual goals described in will be measured. So the progress report has to tell you the ways that they're going to be measuring it. So that could be data collection, teacher observation, it could be work samples, it could be a video of your child doing a project or a presentation. So however they're going to measure that goal, you need to be able to know what that is. Now, here's the clincher here. It says, when periodic reports on the progress the child is making toward meeting the annual goals, and then in parentheses, and such as through the use of quarterly or other periodic reports concurrent with the issuance of report cards, close parentheses, will be provided. So they also have to tell you when the report is going to be sent out to you. Now, what happened when this regulation came up is so many districts looked at that wording and it's like, oh, well, we could do it when we send out report cards. That'd be easy. We remember, okay, report cards, IEP progress reports. We'll do it that way. Well, this is a suggestion in the regulations. This is not a mandate in the regulations, as far as my non-attorney understanding. And I should put myself on full screen and do my disclosure that I'm not an attorney. I can't give you legal advice. And when I quote a regulation, I'm quoting I'm quoting the exact wording, and then the interpretation is my understanding as an advocate. So just remember that I'm an advocate, not an attorney. But look at that. I mean, that's the clause that gave ideas to the districts to do it at report card time. But that's also the clause that you can use to say, this is a suggestion. However, let's look at the frequency and can it be more frequent, and have a discussion during the IEP meeting and not just gloss over that section. Because I really, when I'm in IEP meetings, and I do, work with parents around the country, so a lot of them are virtual. When I'm at IEP meetings, I see people like hardly ever read the baseline data. They read the annual goal and then they are like, okay, are you okay with that? And then they skip down to something else. So they never look at that next little part that's usually right under the annual goal on your state form that says progress monitoring, the method of collection, the frequency, and all that. That usually is totally skipped. So I can understand why parents are like, well, I thought that's where it was, just like, that's how it had to be. However, you can be different. You can ask for something different. And we will talk about that more in a minute. So, the second big myth that I think is out there is you get what you get, and that is it. So, most parents, when they get the IEP report. So let me know in the comments, like, what is usually on your progress reports that you get. So let me go back here to the comments for a minute. So if you could describe, is it a letter code, a number code? Is it a graph, usually like a line graph of progress data points? Is it a narrative? Is it a combination of those? Yeah, I'd like to see what you're getting now. Allison says, I was so irritated with my son's lack of progress last year that I told them I would email midway through the trimester to get a midterm progress report. We are doing that this year. Cool. Yeah, because to wait 12 weeks, I mean, if you look at what most research says about data collection, is you want to at least collect data for 6 weeks, and then you want to look at it, and using a graph is a great, visual way to get a picture. So you collect data for at least 6 weeks, and then the staff and the parent could be looking at that 6 weeks of data and saying, look we've got this great trend line here of going up, up, up. It's great. We're closing the gap. Things are going well. And we celebrate that. Or we collect 6 weeks of data and we see like, nah, not too much. I mean, to me, where's my red flag? That is a red flag if your child is kind of flatlining, right, with the data showing progress. Or, if they're going like this. So all of that should be hints for us as teachers and parents to say, wait a minute, let's talk. We're either going to celebrate or we're going to talk about what can be changed. And that whole what can be changed is a whole nother conversation, right? But for sure, we want to be looking at data at least every 6 weeks. So Allison, I think that 6 weeks midterm, mid trimester is perfect because that will give you 6 weeks of data collection, assuming that people are doing data collection, right? So let's see. Oh, so here, I didn't see this comment, Allison. I heard somewhere it's a good idea to let an intervention happen for 4 weeks and check data how it's going. Well, that's what we, yeah, I think what I've heard and read and, kind of followed as a teacher was 6 weeks. So I don't know. Um, Requesting more frequent progress reports makes sure they actually take some data more frequently than just near the end of the semester. So you can see if things are actually working and a course correct if needed. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's like the huge idea, right? Is that we're not just like checking off another box. Yep, sent home the computerized progress report, sent home, the gen ed teacher sent home the report card. It's like, no, like, what is this telling us? We need some reflection time. We need some conversation time. Um, because your kid could be making lots of progress and you don't realize it. And we want to celebrate that, right? So it's not all about like, when things go wrong and your child's not making progress, it's also for us to know what's going right, because that's what we want to keep doing, right? So that's the part that I see is so missing, is having that conversation time, um, and bringing back, I mean, that could be, something that you do or request, is bringing back the IEP team, um, every 6 weeks. I don't know. And having a discussion, and you can do that individually with teachers, like make appointments and go in and talk to the speech therapist or the PT about their data. But what I like about when we are a group, is we also are supposed to be learning from what the PT is saying, what the speech therapist is saying about progress, and how they're pulling that out, or what they changed in the environment or whatever. So it's not just getting the progress report, but seeing if you can also have more conversations with people at school about what the progress report means. So if we go back to this, you get what you get, and that is it. That's a myth that we're busting today, because if you look at this guidance letter from the Office of Special Education Programs, which is in the U.S. Department of Ed, they issue guidance letters that really have lots of valuable information. They're not, it's not like mandated that districts have to do this, but when you get clarification from OSEP and a letter of guidance, that's usually a strong encouragement to districts to follow that guidance. So this is one. I kind of collect different OSEP letters. That's what we could do a show on sometime, the top 10 OSEP letters you should use. Anyway, so in this OSEP letter, they talk about how the specific times that progress reports are provided to parents, and the specific manner and format in which a child's progress toward meeting the annual goals is reported is best left to state and local officials to determine. So that's the part that you need to make sure. One, look in your state regulations. Do your state regulations have something about the timing, the format of progress reports? Because if you do have state regs, that's what you need to follow. Because that's up to, IDEA says that's up to the states or the local districts. So you'll always want to check what your state regs say about progress reports. However, if there's nothing in your state that directs what a progress report is supposed to look like and what it's supposed to contain and the format of it, and you look in your local district and there's no district policy about that, then that's up for discussion. And remember, all of this is based on individualized, right, support and everything for your child. So yeah, I mean, the the progress report needs to I don't know if I'm seeing a different message here. Um, the progress report needs to be individualized, just like the rest of the IEP does. And when people just quickly skip by the progress monitoring part and the reporting frequency part, um, you don't realize that, yeah, that's something. So you can say, time out, you can warn people ahead of time. One of the things that I want to discuss at our meeting is the progress monitoring data that's collected, the frequency of the reports, what the reports say. Um, because they're not, most IEP school team members aren't going to be used to parents wanting to talk about progress reports. So that's something that you want to kind of plant the seeds of before you actually get to the meeting, that's a topic that want on the agenda to be talking about. Okie dokie. And Anne Marie says, I send feedback on how the or the progress monitoring is written. If it's wrong, is that a state complaint violation? I don't know, Anne Marie. I know you're in South Carolina. So one, yeah, the best thing would be to look up what your South Carolina regulations say about that. Because yeah, otherwise I don't know if it's a complaint or not. And Kim says, in the past, I've been able to have progress reports given at each monthly meeting. How nice. However, in the most recent IEP, it went down to quarterly. Yeah, so, and there's another bonus tip that I'm going to give at the end. And so that will directly do the reply to this concern, Kim. So thanks for bringing that up. She also said, I had to specifically ask for a narrative, much better understanding to have this with the graph. Yeah, I totally agree. I think both quantitative and qualitative data is really helpful. Diana says their progress reports have numbers and a small description. And Tricia says in our schools, they do a math and reading assessment monthly that shows great data, but is usually not tied to the IEP. Yeah, and that can be a problem if then they report on the IEP progress report. If they say, oh, the new STAR testing was this, but that STAR testing doesn't really tap into what the IEP goal, that's like a disconnect, right? So you want them reporting on your child's IEP goals. And a lot of those kind of quick and dirty curriculum-based assessments or whatever aren't that good at measuring IEP goals. They measure, more broad skills. So yeah, there's so many things to find out, right? And Allison says, I find teachers, providers won't collect any data until near the end of the semester unless compelled to do so. They say they are working on multiple goals with the kid and need time for instruction before they can collect data. And I know, and I mean, I was a special ed teacher and I was guilty about, I would take like notes, like anecdotal notes every day, like, for each kid and reading group and math and all that kind of stuff. But as far as like having, every other week or monthly data, there were years when I was a special ed teacher that I did not do that. And I didn't really realize I was supposed to. So, yeah. So some of this is because teachers don't have the training to know this is what they're supposed to do. And so a lot of times I think when we get frustrated with staff, we don't realize that they believe these myths, right? And they believe that, when they had their orientation meeting, the special ed director said, "This is how we do progress reports." And they're like, "Okay, thank you." So yeah, oftentimes the teachers don't even know. It depends on their training, and it depends on the ongoing professional development in the school district, right? Um, yeah. So Tricia says, absolutely, 4 to 6 work weeks only makes sense. Why do an intervention that is not effective? Yeah, and that's the thing. I think a lot of times our kids are blamed for not making progress. And instead, it's like, maybe it's the reading intervention we've been using. Maybe that's not a good match here. And that's why you need that reflective thinking time when you see data and say, what is this? What's the story behind the data, right? Or maybe it means you're doing a great reading instruction, but it's happening after lunch and your kid is in that kind of slump of ready for an afternoon nap. And so maybe it's the time that needs to be switched. But if we only report and make these nice line graphs, and we don't stop and say, what is this telling us? It data leaves clues. That could be our new mantra. And we need to follow those clues and figure out what it's telling us. So thanks for bringing all this up, because this is really, really. So Allison says, Charmaine, what is fair and realistic frequency of data collection to expect, even if they only report to us every 6 weeks? Well, see, that's the thing. I mean, if you want to say you have 6 weeks of data, then you need to have weekly data. So I guess maybe so I was thinking it's not just the number of weeks, but it's the number of data collected, right? So if you want 6 weeks of data, then we would want that to be done weekly. Now, I often hear about teachers saying we can't do things because it takes too much time and we want to be teaching. And I say, yes, we want you to be teaching too. And it doesn't, for me, at least in my mind, it doesn't have to be, data collection doesn't have to be this totally separate, okay, come sit here at the table. We're going to go to the quiet special ed room and we're going to do this. I mean, you can be collecting data as you're teaching the lesson, right? So if, the data is, if you're collecting data about your child answering literal comprehension questions and not multiple choice ones, so if that's the goal, working on answering reading comprehension questions, then while you're doing a reading lesson and you're asking comprehension questions, you're putting tally marks on a post-it note beside you or on a clipboard or whatever. And that's your data collection because you're asking them comprehension questions. So, I mean, if you look at strict scientific kinds of things, whatever conditions they gathered the baseline data in before they wrote a goal, you would use those same conditions each week to collect your data. And that brings up a whole nother story about how reliable and valid is the baseline data. So, it's we could probably do a year-long course on progress monitoring and progress reports, because if you don't have a measurable goal, then how do you collect data? I mean, it's like this domino thing that all these other things have to be in place too, right? So this is kind of like the tip of the iceberg, I think. So great discussion. Thank you. And I do a weekly newsletter. And so if you don't get that, let me show you where you can go. Because I'll be putting the hyperlinks in the newsletter to like this OSEP letter. And yeah, some show it might be fun to do my top 10 letters of guidance. Anyway, if you're not on my email list, you can go to iep.today /weekly adv tips and sign up. So let's carry on here. Because if you feel stuck, we are here to help you, because we know what we accept continues. And this is one of my mantras because this is the truth, right? If we keep accepting that we're going to have to wait 12 weeks before we get a progress report, we'll keep waiting 12 weeks before we get a progress report. If we keep accepting progress reports that tell us very little helpful information about our child's progress and IEP, goals, that's what is going to continue. So I'm not saying you have to be, hell raising to get this changed, because there's other effective ways that we can make change, right? However, I am saying if you want it to change, you have to do something. You have to take an action to help that change happen. Okay, so let's go back and look at what can we do. So what would happen, if you can let me know in the comments? I think this would be a good conversation. What would happen if we fixed all of this? What would happen if we got progress reports that really told us good stuff about how our kid was learning? How about if we got progress reports that really had details that gave us the information we wanted? Or how about if we were in the loop, we were part of the loop, and we really had a good picture of how our child was doing at school? What would happen if we fixed all that? Hey, Liz, she says, thank you. I got some good ideas. Yeah, and if you need to hop off, Liz, come back later and watch the replay, because we're just kind of getting into some of the strategies of what you can do differently. And if you guys know other people that like this would be great for your friend to listen to, make sure you let them know. You can like tag them and tell them we're live right now, because we're getting into good discussions. Yes, Kim said if we could fix all these things, we wouldn't need to have discussions like this. Yes, we could talk about much more fun things in life, right? And that's what we want. Is we want your life to change. We want your life to be better as a result of learning these, effective advocacy strategies. We want the whole purpose I see as myself as an advocate is not only supporting parents and helping them understand their rights, but also to take some of that stress away, and so you feel comfortable, you feel confident, and you're not having to be so hyper vigilant all the time, because that is like really stressful, right? So let's get some foundations in place and things will be better. Oh, okay. So Liz says she's sticking around. Okay. Yes, I know. We love all our friends, right? So that's okay. So let's go back to here and look. So we have 3 different strategies that you can use, and we're going to be looking at those today. So I think we've talked a little bit about this. What's a strategy you could do if you don't want to wait 9 to 12 weeks until you get a progress report? So Allison has talked about how she's emailed the staff and asked for like a semester or trimester break report. And so let's look at some other specific things. Yes, this makes sense. Request, just request more frequent reports, right? And this could be at the IEP meeting, or it could be just an amendment that you call to make that one change. But the good news is, right, if you get them more frequently, supposedly you would know earlier in the year, not have to wait so long, the progress your child's making. The downside is if your progress reports don't tell you how much, your child is doing or how well they're doing, getting useless progress reports more frequently isn't really going to help, right? So it's kind of a two-pronged thing. You need to get progress reports more frequently, but you also need to look at the content. So, like I had said earlier, try to bring up this subject before you sit down at the meeting with folks. And I don't think it's necessarily helpful all the time to share things from the regulations or letters of guidance. However, sometimes you're at a point where you've tried to explain, the benefits of getting more frequent reports and people just aren't buying it. So sometimes you do have to kind of lay that regulation or letter of guidance card on the table. It just depends on how things are progressing. Hopefully, it's a cordial discussion and you're dealing with reasonable people, right? However, before you shoot that email off to your child's teacher requesting more frequent progress reports, let's look at what else needs to be part of the conversation. Strategy 2, discuss with other team members as to what would be helpful information to collect. So this is, before we just go in there with and laying the solutions on the table that we want, it really is helpful to take a step back and get some perspective from other people. Because we know when you get buy-in and ownership from the other team members, the new way of doing things has a greater chance of being successful. We also know when you don't get helpful information, it's almost like being back at square one with a bunch of progress reports that don't tell you much, right? So I want to talk a little bit about how important it is to make sure that that we're really listening. So when teachers are saying, I don't have time to write a monthly progress report, and to be that active listener and to not make those knee-jerk reactions like, oh yeah, I'm sure you're busy. Really try to listen to the people, because if you go in there with might and saying, this is how it needs to be, and this is what I'm requesting, and if you don't grant the request, I want you to write it on the prior written notice, you're going to turn off people. So what we're looking at, what are the art of advocacy? What else can we do to help bring about this change? So my suggestion is that we use it as an open-ended question to say, and also to show the teachers why a monthly progress report would be beneficial to them, right? Because you're coming at from your perspective, you want to know more about what your kid's doing and not doing at school. And then the teacher perspective is, are you kidding me? I got a ton of things I got to do, and making more progress reports isn't on my list. And so to be able to show the benefits and I always think it's good to have benefits identified ahead of time. So if nobody else brings up anything, you've got some little prompts there that you can share. I'm trying to get away from, we have the solution, listen to us. We have to have meaningful participation. And instead trying to do that more collaborative effort of, I wonder if we went to progress reports being more frequent than just every quarter. I'm just wondering, like, how would that be helpful to us as a team? And then you're quiet and you let them think. And sometimes that wait time is like a little unnerving, but silence can be a good thing. So you pose it as a question. I was just thinking, I wonder, well, would it be helpful, do you think, if we had reports more than every 9 weeks? And then the discussion is most likely going to go into many different ways, as far as, yes, the teacher might say, I don't have time to do that. The conversation might go to, I think it's okay that we do it every 9 weeks. The thing that we could add is time to sit down and say, okay, so what is this data showing us? Like that, maybe a quarterly meeting. I mean, does any of this make sense? Am I just rambling? It's hard when I don't actually see you in person. But yeah, so that's what I would like to see, is more conversation, more discussion, and other people can have ideas that we didn't think of, right? We're not the only ones that have good ideas. So Liz says, so we get the progress report and no progress is made. Then how do we talk about the methodology? I feel like that's one thing I really not been able to fully discuss, how the best ways are to teach my child something, which is asking them to do more work and learn a new methodology. I always have a hard time with that word. Yes, yes, yes. And that's the thing, right? So thanks for asking that, Liz, because we want to look at what are the reasons for the no progress. So one could be the instructional strategy that they're using. And like I said earlier, it could be the timing of the day. It could be how often they're meeting. Is it in the general ed class where it can really be generalized and really, anchored in? So there are many variables, and I think, and then especially I think, maybe with reading, because it gets more coverage as far as, the science of reading and the big changes that's been happening in the past few decades with reading instruction. And so if you know that your child really needs a more explicit type of reading instruction, and that's not what they're getting at school, that's a pretty good deduction that, maybe it's the reading strategy that has to change. And it doesn't have anything to do with the time of the day or how often they're meeting, or and that, again, can be a really tricky discussion at IEP meetings, because most likely districts are going to say, well, that's something that, is our prerogative. However, there's nothing to say that can't be a conversation. And what I try to do is, instead of saying a specific, like I want you to use the Barton program with my child for reading, you describe the components of that program as far as being systematic, explicit, you know, and you list, the different components that, of reading that your child needs work on. And, so you can build your case without calling it like I want to have input on the strategy. So what you do is at the beginning of the IEP meeting, when you're talking about your kids' strengths, you talk about they have made the most progress when they have had this kind of instruction, and you describe it, when you talk about the needs, you say, my child really needs this systematic, explicit, multisensory, whatever, um, reading instruction. So you build your case for whatever you want at the beginning of the meeting. And hopefully it's not what you're saying about your child's strengths and needs for reading. Hopefully that's not being just put in the parent input part on the IEP, but hopefully it's in the actual strengths and needs section. And we can go into why that's important at another time. However, yeah, you got to build your case at the beginning. Yes. So, yeah, you can definitely ask for quarterly meetings. And what I would do is try to start the conversation with, traditionally we work, we meet once a year and we go over things. I'm just thinking, I wonder if we met more frequently than just once a year. Like, how would that be helpful for you as teachers, for us to come back together and touch base? And you could say, as a parent, and then you'd stop. You want the teachers to answer. And then in the back of your mind, you have already thought about it. And then you say, as a parent, I was thinking, boy, that would be so great because, and then you list your reasons why you want to meet more frequently. And these are some of the things that we talk about in our membership group, Connecting for Change. So if you want more information on our membership group, let me know, because changing our conversations is one of the pillars of our membership group. And these are the kinds of things that we'll be doing. And speaking of, we have some members of our group here. What we do after our live show is then we have a meetup in our membership group, and people can bring like their IEPs and their progress reports, and they'll be doing that this afternoon. And then we can really individualize suggestions. So on the Facebook Lives, it's more general information. In our Connecting for Change group, it's more specific information. But yeah, for sure, you can ask for that. Diana says, we request the in-depth iReady report, which gives so much more detail. It has been very helpful for us to see both in weak and strong areas. Yeah, and that's a great suggestion, Diana. There are a lot of districts are using things like iReady and, doing more frequent, quick assessments of kids' skills. And a lot of times what you'll see is maybe on an IEP, they'll report like the score, but well, again, that's just like a number. It doesn't tell you much, but yeah. And if you don't know, you can look up whatever the test is, like the STAR test, like do a search on that on the internet. And you'll find like, oh, there's a parent report. Oh, there's a teacher, data report. And so then you can say, I was so amazed when I looked online and they, STAR generates these other reports. Please, I would love to get this. And it's a matter of the teacher or the para going to the computer, to your kid's file and hitting print and then sending it home. So there are easy ways that we can get more information. So that's great. I ready. So it's Diana, if you want to talk about it more, but it's a program that a lot of districts are doing, and there's iReady Reading, iReady Math, and it's a computerized kind of curriculum program, and then it also has like the assessment component too. So we are covering a lot today, and I love your questions because I want to tailor this to what's important to you, right? So let's go back here and look a little bit more. So these are things that I think are important for progress reports to include. And this is just a beginning to get your juices flowing. But I think it's helpful to make a list of what do you want to see in the progress report. So for some parents, for me, I like to learn what has been the learning rate, and also what skills has the child been learning since the last progress report. Oops. And I also am a big data person, and I want to see the data that was used to show the progress. So I'm not just talking about I want the graph, but I want the raw data collection. And that's me as an advocate. That doesn't have to be you as a parent. So you just decide like what's going to be helpful for you. The teacher's interpretation of the data. What a concept. I mean, I can't believe I still read evaluation reports and the teacher puts all the scores for the Woodcock Johnson and no interpretation of the scores. It's like, what? So, and the other thing, like we talked about with Liz, is you need to figure out, is this progress report telling us that we need some changes in the instructional strategies? So in the comments, right, what do you want to see a progress report have in it? And I notice we're at the top of the hour, but keep your comments coming. What do you want to see? And then one of the big questions is, well, what can you do if the team isn't really ready to embrace? Up until now, the team hasn't been willing to embrace sending home more meaningful progress reports. What could you do? This is jumping around here. So this is the third strategy. It's my workaround strategy. So if teachers are like, no, I'm not interested in making more frequent progress reports. So then your next request could be for them to send home whatever they're collecting to measure your child's progress. So if they're doing data collection on, how many reading comprehension questions your kid is answering, then you want copy. What I like is the copy of the question, the copy of the kid's answer. So whatever method they're using to collect that, I mean, sometimes it can be they snap a picture of it and send it to you. Sometimes it's actually sending home the raw data sheet that they're using. But the other thing is, you can ask for like work samples. So, if your child has a written language goal on, writing a paragraph with 3 supporting details, and they're taking a sample at least once a week, having your child write, a prompt like that, then make a copy of that and send it home. So you could have it sent home every week, which kind of can be, a challenge for staff, but you could say, whatever data you're collecting, your teacher observation notes, whatever, please send copies of that home every 6 weeks. So sometimes they're not willing to change, what the district tells them as far as this is how we're going to do it in our district. So then the workaround is, okay, don't make a formal report, don't print out the data graph, just give me samples of the data that's been collected. So Liz says, these seem great. Thanks, Liz. And Allison says, can I say what I don't want? Isolated positive anecdotal comments on a particular success that replaces data. I love the positive, but this is disingenuous. Yeah, I think, you know, just as much as we want to talk about what we want, when we identify what we don't want, that can be really helpful too. And what you see happen is, hopefully these are discussions and conversations that are going on throughout the year, not just when you have your annual meeting, or not just now we're going to have quarterly meetings. But these conversations, if you have some kind of a communication log or email or whatever you do with the staff, I mean, these are questions you want to be asking along the year, right? Like, I noticed he was so excited about the new book that he brought home from the library. I'm so glad that he's, challenging himself. You want to have these conversations throughout the year. It's not just when we call a formal IEP meeting. Hey, Abby. Abby's here from Kentucky. Abby says, I will email something and just ask how things are going. Also requesting what they are currently working on, samples of things. Yeah, and I think that's great. And Abby, I think, because Abby's in our Connecting for Change group, as in Allison and others here. So do you do a weekly email? I was trying to remember for some reason. So yeah, I mean, it can be, Sunday night, you send a quick email with things, what happened over the weekend. So your teacher has things to discuss with your kids, but also let them know what's going on at home, just kind of prime them for the week coming up. Yeah. And to be able to ask for, links for videos are going to be seen in class or whatever, so you can support that learning at home, right? And hopefully, the goal is that we're seeing that, this is about supporting the student. And when kids make progress, that's what helps teachers, right? I mean, it's like, yes, 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 yes. So, I mean, yeah, we want our kids to make progress, and we want teachers to be successful, right? And as parents, we want to know how we can support our kids' learning at home. So, we start out talking about, well, this is what the regs say, this is what OSEP says. However, I think we need to circle back and just look at those relationship and people kind of things that we also need to look at, because that's our reality. So the bonus strategy is to remember the team needs to write new, ambitious goals when your child has met a goal. So if you get a progress report that says goal met, the next step should be, let's write a new goal. And you don't wait until the annual meeting. So this is, I guess, one of my pet peeves as an advocate, is I'll read progress reports and they'll say the goal was met. And it was like, okay, so now what are you doing? And again, I think it's because of the lack of teacher training, is that some teachers don't understand. If you meet a goal midway or whatever throughout the school year, that's an opportunity for you to say, yay, and now we're going to move on to the next step. What would be the next level goal that we want your child to hit? So my bonus strategy is Ask for new goals when goals have been met. Okie dokie. So let's quickly do a recap here. And again, I'm going to have more links, more resources inside my newsletter. So that is the link for the newsletter. So today we talked about 2 myths. One is you can only get progress reports when general ed report cards go home, and we know that is not true. That's one example. You get what you get, and that's it. And that's also not true. We can have conversations and get a lot more in our progress reports. And we can, if we need to, rely on IDEA regs, OSEP letters of guidance. The strategy is to go ahead, have that conversation and request more frequent ones, talk about other information that would be helpful to collect. The workaround is if you can't get an official progress report, ask for samples for the past, every 6 weeks to get samples of your kids' work or the data they're collecting. And that bonus strategy, make sure you ask for a new goal when your child has met a goal. So more ideas are available in my newsletter, and also we can stay connected. And speaking of connected, our Connecting for Change group is having a meetup in about, 12 minutes or so. So if you're a group member, go over to our group, and I hope you have there's my alarm. We have to get ready for the group, and we'll go over your individual progress report. So I am Charmaine Thaner. I am thrilled that you are here with us because I learn so much with and from you. So thank you for being here. And we will be back in a couple of weeks. So take care, and we shall see you soon.